Alright, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Oh, awesome. Chroma key, tie, sparkly. So, here's the plan for today. We're going to get into lesson 16, we are um, going to talk about some schedule stuff and questions from, well, we should have had questions from 14 yesterday. It seems like some people have trouble understanding what deadline means. Like on the calendar and things that we talk about on stream. So yeah, those of you who are asking questions in stream will know what's going, or are being answered by Mr. DeRusi as we speak. Let me see if I can fix this. Okay, so there's a thing. And let us go ahead and take a look at the calendar, just because so we can point out what it means, what deadline means. And so the deadline, this has been up here for a long time. Because of technical difficulties, we are going to extend lessons. What was just going to be lesson 14, but because you need 13 in order to do 14, it's the list situation. Lesson 13 and lesson 14 extended until this evening. And what time that is, you know, it's your own fault for missing the deadline. This is all a gift. You should probably start on it as soon as the stream is over, or start on it now and watch the stream after, but it's a gift. Don't ruin it, okay? And that's going to be it for third quarter grades. We are continuing on with lesson 16 today. Let's put it here. Do lesson 16. I don't know how to say that without yeah, okay, whatever. So wait, today is the 15th, and there's actually, we are not going to stream tomorrow or Friday. You have plenty of work to do with the explore task, and also taking a look at the create task. We obviously haven't presented explore task, or haven't presented create task yet, but there's explore task is still a fair amount of work, and you can keep thinking about what you're going to do for your app, for your create task. Think about, well, we'll go over it when we go over it, but all the information is out there on College Board website, and all the information you need for the explore task is here. And I think we can probably go ahead and let's see here, can we get to this? And then I thought we had done this already, linking the explore task. Dispute that, share, we'll get a copy of this, and in here we can add, well, I already have the link. Add. Okay, so there is the video that explains the explore task and all of the documents for the explore task. So you have plenty to do during the next 2 days that we are not going to stream Thursday or Friday. We will be back Monday. picking up with lesson 17, and then I think the plan will probably be to do the create task explanation on Tuesday, and then I don't know. We'll see what happens after that. So do the app lab part of performance task. Well, there is, okay, so if you can't get to, you can always get to just a blank app lab if you just Google app lab and go to your, well, it would be in code. If you go to your dashboard and go to create, you can go to app lab, and this is the full-on blank app lab situation that has every block that you need, and this is one of the places, and is the place that I recommend that you do your
create task.
yeah yeah, good work. So there's that. Okay, so that is a good place to do the to start putting ideas together, or even just start commenting ideas and pseudocode. I don't know how to is that how you spell pseudocode? I don't know. Ideas, and name your project, whatever you want to name it for now. It's for your own situation, and then you could get to all of your projects from that same spot where it will have your anything that you've remixed or anything that you started from scratch. Okay, so later on we will get to a point where you can, let's see, how do we get to this? This is this. We will make available the technically a section that is for the create task that has a place to put things and making a plan and that sort of thing. But you just need a blank canvas, so to speak, although Canvas is a tool that, anyway, is the App Lab, just generic App Lab is where I would start any sort of forming your ideas for the create task. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with lesson 16. Okay, so we are talking about, this is a pretty advanced idea, and the idea is return functions, or really return. What return does, return ends a function. Inside of a function, you can use it anywhere, but just having return means that if it gets to, if you have like an if statement or some other conditional, it will just terminate that function and continue on. So even if it didn't go through all the for loops, it will stop the function as soon as it gets to it. You can also use return as when you create a function that is supposed to do some sort of calculation, and you call that function, and you use that function with a parameter in the place that you want the number to be, or the result to be, so that it can change. Remember, functions with parameters are the key to creating they make things more versatile and more useful, and more manageable, keeping your code clean and understandable for you. Okay, so things that we've done before output, things that return output. We've had random number. Instead of saying move forward a specific amount, we put in that parameter. And these turtle movement blocks are function blocks that are built into AppLab, but they're still functions. And we would put in inside the parameter of that a random number. So every time it gets called, it calls the random number function. And we've had parameters as in the user interface elements, the yellow blocks, where it's a get text situation. But in here, it's essentially a get a number. We're using return to not get an input or a number input, but actually calculate something and return that the answer to that calculation. And so there's stuff here that you can read if you don't understand it by the time they end. So we are going to be, you can see here, and it might be more understandable when we get to the other bubbles that have AppLab blocks. But here it is console logging. Instead of console logging, a string in quotes or a variable, this is actually a function, and you can tell it's a function because it has the two parentheses and the parameters involved. A function can also be just the name of the function and then open close parentheses. That still lets you know it's a function. It's just a function that doesn't have parameters. But we are using functions that have parameters. That will make more sense here in a second. Decide what values you need to input. Those are your parameters. And your function will have a single variable, return the variable. Okay, so you can do it without creating a new variable. You just use the parameters, which sort of become variables. It'll make more sense in a second. All right, so here they've given us a we've used functions. So we have a function called minval, and what we need to do here is, this is our console log statement, our long concatenation of a string, the minimum of, plus this variable rand1, plus a string, plus this variable rand2, plus a string, plus our function name, which in this case is minval, and our parameters. We have two parameters, which when they get sent to the, let me go back. Yeah, when they get sent to the function, whatever the first parameter is going to be assigned to this parameter right here. So which works as like a local variable. So anywhere inside this function, num1 will be a particular number or a particular value in this case. But when we send it to it, it's called passing through. We are going to pass through the variables, which you could pass through variables or pass through hard-coded values, numbers. In this case, the variables are holding a value, which will be a different number every time, random. And so we are calling this function, calling it as in like calling the play, not naming it. We're calling the function minval, and we're passing through to the function two parameters. The first parameter, that's not what I want. How did that get so big there? And let's pick out a different color. Okay, so we're calling this function minval, and so it's going to initiate this function. And the first thing inside of these parentheses is rand1, which is when we run the program or run the code, will be whatever this is. And this rand1 gets assigned to num1. Okay, these are all variables. They could be called anything. It's just that once we call the function, rand1 gets assigned to num1, and anywhere in the function you can use, or you have to use, num1 as the name of your essentially local variable for calculating. And the same thing, rand2 gets passed to num2, because the function knows the second parameter, okay, we only have two parameters, 1, 2, whatever the second one is gets assigned to that. And then inside the function, you can use those. And the reason it's like that is we can call this function with other parameters. And whatever the first thing is gets assigned to num1, and whatever the second thing is gets assigned to num2. And you can use it however many times in however many different ways. So the parameters just make it a lot easier, or a lot more versatile. Okay, so this should work. Okay, so we have, this is our only console log statement here on line 4, the minimum of whatever the random number is each time we run it, and whatever the random number is each time we run it, plus calling this function. And the key to calling this function is, the whole point of this is that we want to return whatever comes out, and it, in our console log, we are having it print, this function becomes a number. Okay, we are requesting a response or a result from this function of these two parameters. Inside the function, it's creating a new variable called min, which you don't really need to. You can return one of the parameters and just use parameters. But in this case, it's just creating a variable called min and not giving it any value because it doesn't need it at this point. And it's saying if num1 is less than num2, min is num1, otherwise min is num2. Now, there is a flaw in this, and that's, we'll get to it in a second. But this function has a return, and it returns that value. So it turns this entire function call into a number, which is the calculation of finding the minimum, which works every time, hopefully. So 15 and 35, 15, 73, 70 is the second one. So yeah, so it calculates it and gives you back a number. Okay, writing functions that return values, which I think is what we just did. Here we are doing the opposite, essentially. We are going to create a function that returns the maximum, which is, you pretty much just are copying this. I don't think this is that hard. How about let's have a function called max. That's probably a good name for it. And we have an if statement. If num1 is greater than num2, then max gets the number that is greater, which will be number 1. Max gets num1, else max gets num2, and we want to return, we want to give the which we still need to put in here, we want to return max. So in our, and I think you do have to go to text in order to do this, plus it's super easy. There might be another way with using just blocks, but text is definitely easier. Plus, and we're going to call our function, like invoke our function, max val, and our two parameters are rand1, and parameters are separated by a comma, rand1 and rand2. And I'm going to put some spaces in here just so you can see. This should be a green block. Yeah, so we're calling a function we're invoking the function maxval. We're giving it two parameters. These two parameters are being assigned to these two the parameters here, but these values. We're not calling minval anywhere. We're just calling maxval, and it should work. Maximum 19 to 14 is 19, 72, 73, so that works. Same basic idea as the previous one. And let's see here. Let's go back to this and look at some blocks. Okay, debugging. Having multiple return. So here we have 3 console log statements that are each calling the same function, but with different parameters, which is the point of having parameters, is that you can call the function and give it different values to deal with. The problem is, well, let's run it and see what happens. The problem is the maximum of 8 and 8 is undefined, and that's because we don't have a situation that deals with if they're equal, which could have come up on the last one with the random 1 through 100, but is unlikely. But they are making sure that problem happens here by causing these to be, or having these be the same. Okay, run the program, identify the error, inspect the logic, correct the error. Okay, so there's a couple ways we could do this. If we could put we need a situation that deals with if they're equal, which num1 greater than num2, num1 less than. We don't need an else if. We can just use an else because there's only one other condition. There's only one other possibility. Either num1 is greater, num2 is greater, or they're equal. So we can have just an else. We could have an else if and put a condition in there if num1 is double equal to num2, but we are saying the same thing by just doing else. And if it if it makes it to there, remember on if statements, if this is true, this happens, and that's it for the if else block. It never gets to the other ones, but it especially doesn't get to it because it's a return statement. So anytime, like I said, anytime it gets to a return statement, it kills the function or terminates it. So what do we want to return? Let's just have it. They are the same. And have it run. There we go. So it returns, in this case we're having it return a string, some letters, or in this case combined into words, combined into a sentence. We're having it return this sentence in the condition that they are equal, which it would only get to if neither is greater than the other. Why is there a... Never mind, don't need to waste time with it. Okay, so we have, the tricky part is calling the function with parameters, in this case, or not tricky part. This shows you how this function using parameters is useful. We can have it, have the function work in many
Real quick,
situations.
Mr. Holt.
Yeah.
I think another solution to that number 5 could also be for the else if. We could have it less than or equal to, and then it would just return the maximum of 8, and 8 is 8 if you change the else if to less than or equal to. So
Yeah.
line 9, num1 is less than or equal to num2. Return num2, and
Yeah.
it will just give you
Yeah, and you could put the equal to here, or on either one, because if it gets to here, it kills the function with return. Yeah, this is probably the correct way to do it.
I just think for the example, it just makes more sense for the console log.
Yeah,
the other one
that
would
sentence,
say.
Yeah, you're right. That sentence doesn't make sense. We could put the console log in another function so that it will return a specific string that made grammatical sense. But yeah, I do think this is right. Thank you, Mr. DeRusi. And you could put
So many different ways to do things.
Yeah, and you could put equals here. You could put it both places. It wouldn't matter. But if you had greater than or equal to here and less than or equal to here, that equal is irrelevant because it would never make it to here. But this should also be the same. Okay. Yeah, I agree. That's probably a better way to do it. That's definitely a better way to do it. Okay, so here we have to debug some things. Let's multiple statements. All right, so here we are given a function called constrain that takes three parameters. The first one is called input, low and high, and the goal is that if input is below a number lower than the first one, you return, or excuse me, if the input is lower than the low, we want to return low. If it's higher than the high, we return high. If it's in between, which is the only other scenario, we return itself. Okay, so let's run it and see what we have. Okay, so clearly it's not working. Limiting 5 to the range of, oh wait, did I? Does that look like, it actually looked like it was working. Yeah, okay. Limiting 5 to the range of, yeah, okay, so it's not working because this is, they give it to you not working. So if 5 is, it is working some of the time, because if we wanted 5 to be limited to the range of 10 to 20, 5 is lower than the low, so we give it the low, and 10, we give it itself. So it is working sometimes, but it's not working here, because if we were limiting 25 to the range of 10 to 20, we should be getting 20. So let's figure out what we have here. So we have input is, if input is greater than low, we return input. But it's not just greater, it it needs to be, if input is between high and low, we return itself. Else, if it's below, we return the low end of the range. And if it's above, we return high. So we can change this. Again, there's a lot of ways to do this. But I'm going to change this first one to be an AND statement. And we can use equal. So if input is greater than or equal to the low, so it's above the low end, and input is less than or equal to high, return itself. Then we can get rid of this. Let's, we could put this in here, which is the same, yeah. Okay, else, actually this works pretty well. I'll show you a couple other things. All right, so first of all, if input is greater than or equal to low, and it's less than or equal to high, that means we want to return input. It means it's good. We'll call it in between the range as good or successful or fine. And if it's not, we need to check something else. Okay, so if it's between low and high, it's fine, return itself. Okay, if it's not both of those things, we now need to check to see if it's above or below. So if it's if input is, let's switch this around, if input is greater than the high limit, and actually let's change the names, input, low limit, and high limit, and of course I need to change its usage. Let's copy if input is greater, so long as input is greater than or equal to low limit and it's less than the high limit, we will return itself. It's good. Okay, so now that means if that's not true, we need to check to see if it's too high or too low. So if input is greater than high limit, we want to return high limit. Otherwise, return low limit. Okay, so let's put some check if input is between limits, else let's put let's go like this. If it isn't, check if it's too high or too low. And this one goes to that one goes to that. Let's go there. And it should look like this, okay? So we're checking to see if it's between the limits, and if it's not, we now are checking to see whether it's too high or too low. And let's see here. Yeah, all right, so let's put different numbers in here. Let's go, so our limit's always 10 to 20. Let's change it to, actually, no, this all makes sense. Okay, so this is gonna be, this should return low because the input is lower than the range. The range for all of these is 10 to 20 because it's, the second one is the low and the third one is the high. So is 5 between 10 and 20? No, we should get the low. If it's equal to the low, give the low, or the input, doesn't matter, it's the same value. If it's in between, give itself. If it's equal to the high, give itself, or the high, same thing. And if it's too high, give the high limit, which it does here. 25 to the range is 20. Okay, the other way to do this is to use another variable, which is sort of the way they suggest it. It's all about what you return. And in this case, we're going to create a new variable called output. And our return is going to, at the end, we are going to return output. And throughout this in between, we are just going to reassign input. So if input, actually, is there a better way to do this? If input is greater than or equal to low, I don't know how to do this without doing an and, because you can't check to see if it's within.
So you can do a if, else if, and then else if you're going to do it with a variable.
Yes, but if input is greater than low, it could be too high, or it could be okay. Do you understand what I'm saying?
If input is greater than low, you would return, or you would set the output to the input.
But what if it's input is greater than high? If it's outside the range but too high, this first would be true.
So if input is less than low, output low. Else if
Oh, yeah,
input is greater than high,
that's
output
right.
high, and then else output input.
Okay, so yes,
Very
thank you.
confusing.
Yeah, we can do it this way. You're right. Check for, instead of checking to see if it's inside the boundary, check to see if it's outside the boundary. So if let's get rid of this. Let's do another else if. Okay, else if input is less than low, return low.
You're going to set the output.
Oh no, that's right.
Low,
We're
yeah. And then you
switching.
return at the end.
Yeah, let's just fix these. If input is greater than this, return this. Otherwise, okay. So instead of returning here, we are just reassigning the value of output. And so output, okay, if input is too low, we're going to set output to low. If input is too high, we're going to set output to high. Otherwise, output gets input, meaning itself. I think this sort of defeats the purpose of the whole return statement, because the point of the return is that it terminates the function, but this also works. This might make things a little more clear.
I think logically this kind of flows a little bit easier.
Where we're
It's
always
probably
looking for a return, where the last line of this function is return something. This is the way they recommended at the beginning, where you create a new variable, a new local variable, so every time you call it, this variable gets reinitialized, which it would anyway, because of reassigning, but either way, it only has to do with this function, so it's fine to reset every time you use it. But yes, this does make more sense that the last line is always going to be a return instead of having returns all the way through. But both will work. Okay, and bubble 7. Did we even get to this one? I don't think I did. Use a function that returns a value in an app. Okay, so we've created a function that contains blocks of code. Oh, okay, sweet. Event.key. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens yet. And, oh no, event.key was left. Okay. Simple turtle driver, error keys are pressed. Currently, a turtle can drive off the screen. If we are clever about our constrain function, however, to prevent from happening. So right now, if you go all the way left, it keeps going all the way to the left. It goes past. We don't want that. So starter code provides turtle move. Additionally, a working version of constrain is provided. So the function update turtle gets called when, okay, so this is our main event handler. When screen 1 has a click or a key down, it does what it's supposed to do. The X location gets itself -10, meaning it goes 10 pixels that way, right, up and down, we're good. And at the end of that, it calls update turtle, which moves the mouse to these new locations, because these are variables. And so our constrain function takes input low high. So output, if input is less than low, output equals low. So we can, let's say, do it in update turtle, call a constrain function twice to prevent the turtle from going off the screen. Okay, so we want to, I think we are supposed to call these functions in the parameters of move to. Okay, so or at least this is the way I would do it. We're going to move to, okay, so the turtle function move to, always the first parameter is the X of the turtle, and the second one is the Y. But instead of actually typing in a value or using these variables, which is what it started with, we are going to use a return function. A return function that needs three parameters. The first one is going to be its X location, and it's this one will be for its Y location. And then our parameters, our low parameter is 0, and our high parameter is 320. You just have to know that there are 320 pixels all the way to the right. It goes to 320. And in fact, we may want to change that to like 5 and 315 just to keep it visible, but we'll see right here. And Y goes from 0 at the top. That's the lowest Y location. And the highest Y location is 450. We'll change that in a second. So when we call this function, we are getting whatever the result of this is. And actually, I think we need to pass through yeah, in order for these variables to get, they're global variables. So actually, let's see if we can do this without passing them through there. Yeah, we should be able to do it without passing through. Okay, so we call this, we have variable output. If output is below low, we are going to return low. Else if, yeah, okay, so this is how we finished the last one with Mr. DeRussi's suggestion. And so the point is that every time we call this function, we want to return a value that will be within the range of possible, or we'll keep the turtle on the screen, just like before we had the range of between 10 and 20 for the value. Let's see if this works actually. Yeah, okay, so if I hit key down to the left, if key down is left, X location gets 10 pixels, minus 10 pixels, meaning 10 pixels to the left. But if I'm already at 0, if what we send this function is already 0, it won't go below 0 because we are returning this parameter. I don't know how else to explain it. And we should be able to go up and have it blocked there. So you can see why. Why is it not letting me? Oh, because if I go way past, it should still. Return output. It also should reset the, well, this isn't necessary for here. It is locking it in, but if I go past here and hold down the X, let's have, let's console log X lock and see what happens. Okay, 1.6. Oh, wait, hold on. Let's go this way. Whoa, down, 10, 50, 40, 30, 20, 0. Okay, so X location, the variable X location is actually going below 0, but it's not letting the turtle move below 0 because of our constraint, which if I hit back, it'll go up. There is a way, and in our constraint here, you could reset xlock. Oh no, if there is a way to do it, but it's not worth going through that now. So that to keep the variable x location not actually going negative, because if you hold down this and go past 0 to the left, it means you have to hit to the right a few times in order to get that variable back above 0. There's a way of doing that, and if you need help with that for your particular project, I can probably talk you through it or give you an idea of what to do, or do an example that does something like that. Okay, last one. Use a function that returns a value. Hold on, was this supposed to be the same thing? No, this is not time. We have a function called wrap that doesn't have anything in it. It takes an input, a low, and a high. Okay, this is super useful. You would know this from video games, that where you go all the way to the left, it should come around to the right. So we are running update turtle at the end of every time, which, let's see here, we should be able to move. Oh, we don't even have update turtle. Oh, we can't run anything yet because it we don't have that. We're calling that function every time. Okay, so we call update turtle. We want it to move x, move to x and y, and it's assigning these new variables, which we do need to keep global so that we can use them for the next time the key is pressed, instead of just putting, like normally you could just put these return function calls into these parameters, but that would keep it from
So for the
working
last
correctly.
example,
Yeah.
if you ran the function with xlock and ylock, getting so like lines 20 and 21, if you did that on the example instead of the way you did it,
It
I
would
think
prevent it. Okay,
it
yeah,
would prevent it from the extra clicks not showing up. I guess it's hard to explain that one.
I gotcha. So on our previous one, if it's stayed, yeah. So the way we had it, which I showed like several times, was having xlock go x location back. Let's try that idea, which was we give xlock x location. That's where we call our return function, and it sets up. Have it move to x location, and you would do the same. Well, just go ahead and just so it looks normal. Y location gets this return function called to check for its range, and we'll have it move to Y location. And let's see here if that works. We still need the let's console log to make sure. And so it goes down, and does it ever go past 0? It doesn't go past 0, so if I hit to the right once, it works. Okay, so yeah, that is the way that you could have that work. All right, so here we are given the same thing, except we want, before we had it, if it goes past 0, set it to 0, but we want it to go past 0 and set it to the maximum. So here we are given a wrap function where we have a new variable input and output. So we are going to need an if statement, or a bunch of if statements. So if this is just going to be just like before, except instead of, okay, so before we had that 10 to 20 range. If it's below 10, the output is 10. If it's in between, it's fine. If it's above 20, it gets 20. Here, if it's below 10, it gets 20, and if it's above 20, it gets 10. That's the whole sort of wraparound thing. So here, if input is less than low, then output is going to get high. And then high, or the other way, if output is greater than high, input, or out, whatever. Give me a second here. If input is less than low, output is going to get whatever comes through as that last parameter. And then if we need an if else, or else if input is greater than high, we want to return low. Oh no, hold on. Output gets low, else output gets, we do have to give output something. We can't just leave it. Output gets input, meaning it doesn't change. It's the same. And return input. Let's see if this works. There we go. It goes that way. Sweet. Okay. So there we go. Instead of having it not go below 0, or if it wants to go below 0, keep it at 0. If it goes below 0, we give it the maximum number to give it that appearance of wrapping around. And I think that's it for the lesson 16. If you guys have any questions on this, go ahead and send them to the form, which, let's see if we have any. Mr. DeRusi, do you know if we have any new questions for?
It looks like there's one for lesson 15, bubbles 9 through. The debug
Let's
console
take a
sometimes
look.
says false. So they gave you some links for an app lab.
Okay, give me a second here. Let's go to that. Should have this open. Question submission form. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We have answered a ton of questions. Okay, so in lessons 15, bubble 9, 20, debug statement says false. Okay, so let's take a look at this. See if this works. Okay, if you could. All right, so we have a blank array. We're creating an array that has 10 random numbers. Variable 5 count is false. And because you have 1 here instead of I may have typed that also. Okay, if test array I, index I, because we're using I as our counter, so that every time we go through this loop, it's going to be a different number because we increase it by 1 every time. If we're going through each item in this list called test array and checking if the item, we're starting with item 0 and checking to see if it's 5, and then we're going back around adding 1 to our counter, and next we're checking item 1, and the next time item 2, all the way through until we reach the end of the list. So that should work. There is a 5, there's 5, let's see, false, yeah. Okay, so that's that one. Let's see if there
I think all the rest were the exact same thing.
okay. All right, so that's it for questions, and I think we're going to wrap it up there. Okay, so we'll see you guys tomorrow, and for lesson 17, or no, not tomorrow, excuse me. We'll see you guys on Monday. No stream tomorrow, no stream Friday. Monday for lesson 17, and we are locking off our super generous extension until this evening at some time. You should be working on it now. Okay, so that's where we're going to call it, and you guys have a good day. Let's see if I can get this ever to work. Okay.